Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach, we begin a new Masechta Kidushin. So this Masechta is going to discuss all the details regarding Kidushin, being Mekadesh Isha, which is specifically the first stage of marriage, which the Torah is Mekadesh in the pasuk of Ki Yikach Ish Isha, as the famous Rambam that describes this in the beginning of Hilchos Ishus, that before Matan Torah there was no institution of marriage where this concept of Kidushin existed. The Rambam there describes, before Matan Torah, a person meets a woman in the street, and then he just brings her into his home and lives with her, and that's it, and they're married, and they're Eishes Ish. This concept of Kidushin is a Chiddush HaTorah. And Torah says that you give a Isha a kesef, which today we do it with a ring, or as the Mishnah will say, there's three efanim, kesef, shtar, or bia, and now she becomes an Eishes Ish. She's married, 100%. Elamai, but she still goes back to her father's house. She doesn't necessarily even live with you, B'chlal, but nevertheless, she's an Eishes Ish. And the Chiddush of the Torah is not only the fact that she becomes an Eishes Ish before she even lives with you, but that there's a concept of acquiring a woman, of an aspect of a kinyan, that you acquire her to a certain extent. Whatever the definition of this concept of a kinyan is, it's not so simple to understand what it means to acquire a Isha. Before Matan Torah, there was no such a concept of a kinyan as it relates to a Isha. A kinyan relates to an object, or maybe to an Eved. But over here, the Torah was Machadish, that there's a concept of a kinyan as it relates to an Isha. That's the Chiddush HaTorah, even before the Yichud and the Nisuin, which is the second stage of marriage. And that's what the beginning of the Masechta will speak about, and a lot of the Masechta. Now, along the way in this Masechta, it will also speak about other kinyanim. Just like it starts off speaking about the kinyan of an Isha, it will later speak about in the first Perek the kinyan of an Eved, Eved Ivri, Eved Kanani, and other kinyanim, b'chlal of objects or of a piece of land, different kinds of kinyanim. That's in the first Perek. And then the rest of the Masechta, a lot of it will discuss halachas of Kidushin, and then the last Perek of this Masechta will discuss the halachas of Yuchsin, how you verify a person's yichus, the lineage. That's the last Perek. Okay, let's begin. Sagt Heilige Mishneh, Ha'isha niknes b'shalosh drachim. A wife, a woman, is acquired by her husband or to her husband in three different ways, in one of three ways, and which the Mishnah will soon say. And v'kainas atzma, and she could acquire herself back, to gain back her independence, to be allowed to marry to whoever she wants, b'shtei drachim, in two ways. So what are they? Niknes, she could be kaina, she could be acquired by a man, by her husband, b'kesef, either by giving her kesef, or b'shtar, you give her a document, and in the shtar it says, hareat mukadeshesli, or b'biyah, with the act of cohabitation, with marital relations, and that act itself is, they become married with a Kidushin. But here we're talking about a biyah, which is l'shem Kidushin, and then after this, they separate, and the husband goes his way, and she goes her way, until later, when the second stage of marriage comes about. So what's the halachas of kesef, shtar, and biyah? So regarding kesef, there's a machlokes here. What's the minimum amount of kesef for the Kiddushin? So the kesef, beishama yomrim b'dinner or b'shaveh dinner. It has to be the value of a dinner, or even if it's not an actual dinner. Again, the dinner actually doesn't mean the value of a dinner, but it means an actual dinner, or b'shaveh dinner, or something which has the value of a dinner. And the Gemara will bring where Beis Shammai took this from. Why does it have to be punkt dafka, the value of a dinner? At least the value of a dinner, correct. But Beis Hillel say bepruta, or b'shaveh pruta. You give her one pruta. Now she says pruta is a copper coin, or b'shaveh pruta, something that has the value of a shaveh pruta, of that pruta.
That's even less.
And much less, correct. And how much is that? V'kama hi pruta. What is the pruta? Echad mishmayna be'isser ha'italki. An eighth of an Isser Italki, an Italian Isser which was silver, and its value is 8 of these copper coins, 8 of prutis. So an eighth of that is a shava pruta. The Rambam actually gives the shir regarding silver. How much silver is it to be Mekadesh and Isha? It has to be silver that weighs a half a barley. That's the shir of shava pruta in the weight of silver. And now this woman could acquire herself back to be her own, independent, to marry whoever she wants. Beget, either through a get, which is what we learned by Arichas in the previous Masechta, or b'misas abal, or if her husband dies. So the Mishnah weiter, hayavame niknes bebiyah. A yavame gets acquired to the yavam, so the yavame is when her husband passes away without children. and now there's a mitzvah that the brother should marry her. But over here, it says in the Torah, there's only one way that she becomes married to the Yavam, only with Bia, only with marital relations. There's no Kesef and Shtar. There is the union of Kesef and Shtar, which the Gemara brings in Yavamis, Midrabanan. The Yavam can give her Kesef and Shtar, and that's what's called Maimer, that she'll be married to him Midrabanan. But Min HaTorah, there's only one way for a Yavam to be kind to the Yavam, and that is Bia. And the Kaina Satzma, and she acquires herself, B'chalitza u'b'misa hayavam. Through Chalitza, as the Torah describes, the woman spits at her at the shoe and so on, and the whole arichas that the Torah says regarding Chalitza or Misa hayavam if the Yavam dies. Okay, just to mention here, benegeh to what it said in the Mishnah, Kesef, Shtar, and Bia, this is brought in many Maimarim and Chassidus, regarding also the Ish and Isha, which refers to the Yidden and the Eibishter. And the relationship between Yidden and the Eibishter, there's also these three Ifanim of Kesef, Shtar, and Bia. There's different ways it's described and explained in Chassidus. One of the simpler Hasbeidim is that Kesef and Shtar refers to mitzvahs and Torah. Shtar is the writing of the teichen of the marriage. So that's what comes out in Torah when you learn the content of the relationship between the Yid and the Eibishter, when you learn it in the Torah. And then the Kesef is money. That refers to Gemilas Chasadim or B'chlal, all the mitzvahs. And Bia is more of a pnimiyistic relationship that a Yid comes to the Eibishter through davening. That's the three Efanim that the Mishnah is talking about over here. The title of this Indian, Kesef, Shtar, and Bia, and what it means, Baruchni, is there's a famous letter that the Rebbe's father wrote to the Rebbe right before the Chasana. The Rebbe's father couldn't attend his Chasana, and he writes to the Rebbe the inyanim of the Chasana, B'pnimi, Salpi Kabbalah, and also different things that he gave the Rebbe guidance when he gave to the Chasana. And the Rebbe's father explains this whole Mishnah al Pi Kabbalah, and he also with the Hemshech of the Gemara, all al Pi Kabbalah. It's beyond the scope of this shir to go through this whole Indian, but it's very interesting. He goes through the whole Indian al Pi Kabbalah. The Bishamai, Bishil, the dinner, and the Pruta, all the details, everything. It said in the Mishnah, the Lashon, that a woman is acquired. She's a kinyan to her husband. What's the difference that over here, the Tane Ha'isha Niknes? The Mishnah uses this expression that there's a kinyan for this Isha. And as I mentioned, that was the Chiddush of the Torah, that there's a concept of a kinyan for an Isha. But why is it that when it comes to the beginning of the first Mishnah of the second Perek, the Tani Ha'ish Mekadesh, there it says that a man is Mekadesh his wife, the Lashon of Kidushin. So as we'll see soon, the Gemara will tell us what the word Kidushin means, but what's the difference? Why here does it use the Lashon of Kinyan? And from Rashi it's mashma that the main question the Gemara has is on the Mishnah here. The Gemara is wondering, what's the source of this concept that there's such a thing as a Kinyan for an Isha? The Pashtus, a Isha is not a Kinyan. A Isha, you're Mekadisher, but not Kinyan. Where is the source for this? So the Gemara explains, Mishum de Kaboyla Misni Kesef. Because in the Mishnah it says that one of the ways to acquire a wife is with Kesef. And the Kesef, minallah, what's the source for the Kinyan of Kesef? As we'll learn later in the Perek here, Gomar Kiche Kiche Mizdei Efren. So one of the opinions is that this is learned out with the Gzeira Shava. Kiche Kiche, from what it says, when Avram Avinu brought the Moras HaMachpelah by Stei Efren. Now, what is the two psukim? Ksiv hacha, here by the Isha, the pasuk says, Ki yikach ish Isha. If a man takes his wife. So it doesn't spell out in the Torah how. What is that kiche? What's the ki yikach? So Ksiv hasam, over there when Avram Avinu bought Moras HaMachpelah, the pasuk says, Nasati kesef asodeh, kach mimeni. So it uses there also the term of kach, take from me. So we learn out that just like there the kicha was with kesef, so too over here the kicha is with kesef. Now the kicha ikri kinyan, and over there regarding the kicha of buying Moras HaMachpelah, buying a property through kesef, that's referred to as a kinyan. The chsiv, as it says over there in the pasuk by Moras HaMachpelah, Asada Ashekona Avram. This is the field that Avram Avinu acquired. So it says the expression of kinyan. Dinami, or another pasuk where it says Sadais, when you acquire a property, bekesef yiknu, you acquire it with kesef. So the Gemara here is bringing a second pasuk. Taisva says because there would be maybe room to say when it says by Avram Avinu Nasati kesef hasada kach mimeni, or sorry, when it says hasada asher kona Avraham, lav dafka Avram Avinu actually acquired the sada with the kesef. Maybe when it says in the pasuk there Nasati kesef hasada, he paid for the sada. He paid for the sada with kesef, but the actual acquisition, the change of ownership, lav dafka, it happened through the kesef. Maybe it happened through a chazakah, through some other way. So therefore, the Gemara is bringing here a pasuk of the sadais bekesef yiknu, that you clearly see this lashon regarding buying a property with kesef. It uses the term kinyan. So this is the Gemara's explanation here. Because it says in the pasuk that the source of the kinyan of a isha is learned from the way you acquire a property, and there it says the term kicha, and that kicha is also called a kinyan. So therefore the Mishnah says that what the Torah is being mechadish for us is that there's a concept of acquiring a isha with a kinyan. Okay, so therefore tani ha isha niknes. That's why it says here isha niknes. But the Gemara goes on and asks, but if so, we understand why it says the term kinyan here. But now the question is on the first word, v'nisni hasam ha'ish kaina. Or sorry, again, the Gemara will come back to the first word over here in a second. But first the Gemara asks regarding the second pedic, why over there does it say the word mekadesh, Kidushin? Why doesn't it say there, similar to here, the way it says it in Torah, that there's a kinyan? So even if it wants to talk about a halacha of the ish over there, that in the second pedic it talks about the halacha that a ish could send a shliach to be Mekadesh's wife, but why doesn't it use the term kaina? Answers the Gemara, me'ikare, in the first Mishnah, in the first pedic, Tana Lishna Dairaisa. The Tana of the Mishnah uses the expression of marriage the way the Torah describes it, that the Torah was Mechadesh a kinyan. And in the first Mishnah of the second Pedic, Tani Lishna de Rabbanan. It's using the expression that the Rabbanan said that the Rabbanan are describing that there's another aspect to the marriage. And what is this Lashon de Rabbanan? Omai Lishna de Rabbanan. What does the term Kidushin mean? The Asar law Akula Alme Kehektish. When a person is Mekadesh's wife, she becomes an Eishes Ish. Besides the aspect of Kinyan that there's also an aspect of an Isser. That he's asering her, that now she becomes an Eishes Ish, and she's aser to the entire world. Right? And that's how Taisus over here actually discusses the lashon that you say when you're Mekadesh a wife. What do you say? Harei at Mekudeshes li. So according to what the Gemara here says, that the word Mekudeshes means that you're aser. It's not so clear what it means when you say Harei at Mekudeshes li. It almost sounds like he's saying, and you're aser to me. Obviously it doesn't mean that. So Taisus has two pshat, and one pshat Taisus says is that Mekudeshes means actually that you're muyuchedes and muzumenes to me. That's the simple taich of Mekudeshes. Mekudeshes means you're designated and only mine. That's the taich of Mekudeshes. But in the pshat, with the way the Gemara puts it, that the word Kidushin means asala, so Harei Mekudeshes means you're Mekudeshes, comma, you're Mekudeshes to the whole world, you're asa to everyone else, li, and you're only going to be mine. That's the meaning of that statement. So there's different ways how to teach the exact statement of Harei Mekudeshes li according to this. Again? Second pedic, correct. That's what the Gemara said. The Mishnah uses the term Kiddushin. Okay, so what we see over here is that in Kiddushin, there's two aspects. There's a Kinyan aspect, and that's what the Mishnah is saying here, and there's the Kiddushin, there's the Isser aspect that the Tana mentions in the second pedic. Now here the Gemara comes back to the first word of the Mishnah. Even though the Gemara should have focused first on the first word, but apparently the Gemara wants to first explain the inyan of Kiddushin as opposed to the Kinyan aspect and the Kinyan aspect and so on. But then it comes back to the first word, the Nisni Hacha. It should say there in the Mishnah, Ha'ish Kaine. It wants to talk about the inyan of Kinyan. But why is it talking about the Isha? Let it begin with Ish. The man is Kaine, his wife, in these three ways. Answers the Gemara, Mishum de Kabayla Misni Seife. Because in the Seife it wants to say, V'kaina is Atzma, that she acquires herself. Bidida. So there it's speaking about her acquiring herself. So it's talking about the Isha. So Tana Name Reisha Bidida. So therefore it starts in the Reisha as well, talking about the Isha, the three ways that an Isha could be acquired to her husband. Frek the Gemara, but that's not enough of an answer. V'nisni ha'ish kaine u'makne. Even if it's a Seife, it wants to say that she will be acquired to herself, but it could use the term kaine, and that the man could be kaine her, and makna, that he could be makna, he can sell her back to herself. And says the Gemara, no, it actually can't use that lashon of makna. It can't say that the man is makna his wife back to herself in three different ways. Why? Because one of those two ways is if the husband dies. The lavi makne, he's not actively being makna her to herself. Min shemayu the makni law. That's something that the Eibishter does. When the husband dies, she becomes independent again. So therefore it can't use the term kaine and makne, so therefore it uses the term isha niknis and kaine satzma. Another pshat. Why it doesn't say in the Mishnah ha'ish kaine, that a man acquires his wife. Itana kaine, because if the Mishnah would use that expression, that the man acquires his wife, hava mineh, I would make a mistake and say afilu bal karchach, that a man could be mekadesh and acquire his wife even against her will, even without her consent. Similar to the halacha, the way it is by a get. The halacha by a get is that you only need the das of the ish, and you don't need the das of the isha. If we would say a ish kaina, I would think that it's all in the control of the man. He can marry a wife without her consent at all. So therefore, tana ha isha niknis, the Mishnah is saying that she acquires herself, she gets acquired, that is, to her husband. The midaita in shaloi midaita loy. Only if it's with her das, with her consent, then the Kidushin takes effect. Without her consent, the Kidushin does not take effect at all. There's a big discussion here in the Rishonim what the source for this is. Is it Minat Torah? Is it Midrabanan? Where is this Inyan? Where is this? Gemara doesn't bring, not here, not anywhere else, any source for this Inyan, that it has to be Medaita. So here on the side of the Gemara, they bring from Rashi. Rashi later in the Masechta says that the source is from what it says. Well, Rashi later actually in the Masechta says it's not a source of a pasuk, but because Kidushin has to be Medaita, just like every other Kinyan. You can't acquire anything from anybody without the consent of the seller. If he's selling you an item, a piece of property, whatever it is, you need his das to sell. Isha is selling herself to her husband, so she's giving herself up a certain ownership, level of ownership to her husband. There has to be a das in that. That's what Rashi says. But there's another Rashi that says that it's learned from a pasuk. The lashon of the pasuk, v'holcha v'hoisa leish acher, is mashma that she's going midaita. That's mashma that she's going on her own. I guess there's a famous discussion about this. There's two different Rashis here that says two different reasons. There's a discussion of all the Rishonim about this, because even when you get to Kinyonim, there's a famous Gemara in Baba Basra that says that even though you need the consent of a seller regarding the king should take effect, but there's a din of Tolyu, Vizav, and Zvini Zvini. If someone is forced to sell something and he sells, the sale takes effect. And the Gemara there says, because after he was forced, he's getting money for it, so then the sale takes effect. So the chayd over here, the same thing should apply. Okay, the Rashba, all the Rishonim here speak about this barichas. But the halacha is that you cannot be mekadesh ha'isha unless you have her das. Again, what? From Yitzchak and Rivka, over there, Rashi Taka brings, by Rivka, Rashi says, Mikan she'eni isha miskadesh sela midaita. But in Pshutish Mikra, but I don't know if you could learn from, you don't learn from before Matan Torah, the Rishonim don't bring that makar over here when they get to this halacha. Okay, the Gemara moves on now to the next word in the Mishnah. What did it say? Isha niknis, what's the lashon of the Mishnah? B'shalosh, shalosh drachim. Now shalosh is lashon nekeva, it's not lashon zachar. Shloisha is lashon zachar, and shalosh is lashon nekeva. Even though you may have thought that it's the opposite, usually when there's a hey at the end of the word, it makes it lashon nekeva, but by numbers, it's the opposite. Shalosh is lashon nekeva. Now, Chazal, Mishnayos always speak b'lashon zachar. Why over here does it say shalosh lashon nekeva? The Tani shalish. Why does the Mishnah say the word, the number? Shalish, which is lashon nekeva, lisni shloisha. Why doesn't it say, like it usually does, shloisha, a lashon zachar? And it says the Gemara mishum the kabayla misni derech. When it says over here shalish drachim, ways, and the derech lashon nekeva. Derech is a lashon nekeva. It's a feminine expression. Where do we see this? In the pasuk here it says, and I will notify them through my Torah the way that they should go in it. Now it doesn't say boy, but it says ba, lashon nekeva. So I see that derech is lashon nekeva. Frak the Gemara, you're telling me that derech is lashon nekeva, and that's why it says shalosh, but ve'elaha de Tanya. This that it says in the Brisa, really it's a Mishnah, the Tanan. V'shiva drachim baitkin is azav. There are 7 different ways that we have to inspect to see a zav. This is a man, a male, that has a certain emission of his body, and it makes him tamei. But now, by the zav, the halacha is you have to see whether this ziva, this flow, came out ba'onis. Was it something that something caused it? Or just came out without any oinus, without anything else unusual that he did or happened or he ate maybe that caused it. So there's 7 different things that you have to be baidik to see. Rashi brings with food, it could be a sickness, or it could be certain activity or certain things that bring about the ziva, so then he's going to be toher. Because the pasuk says mipsara, he has to come out from the flesh on its own without any other outside causes. So over there, what's the expression that Mishnah uses? B'shiva drachim baitkin es azav. So it doesn't say sheva lashon nekeva, it says shiva lashon zachar, even though it says drachim, and we just said drachim is lashon nekeva. So nisni sheva. So why doesn't it say sheva? Answers the Gemara. Actually, the opposite is true. Mishum the kabayil misni derech, because there it says drachim, derech, ways. We find that derech is also used as a lashon zachar. The The word echad is lashon zachar. It doesn't say achas, which would be a lashon nekeva. It says b'derech echad yetzu elecha b'shiva drachim yanusu lefanecha. Talking about in a battle when the Eibishter is saying the brachas to the Yidden that they'll run away from you. So it uses the term derech echad. So we see that derech is actually lashon zachar. So therefore, in that Mishnah, it says shiva also a lashon zachar. So frekte Gemara. So now what comes out? We have a contradiction. Ihachi kashu kroya dodi. So it comes out that we have a contradiction here of the psukim. In one pasuk it says derech lashon nekeva, and another pasuk lashon zachar, and also kashya nami masnisan dodi. And we have a contradiction here in the Mishnayos. Sheva or shiva, that is, and shalosh lashon zachar lashon nekeva. The Gemara answers, the contradiction in the lashon of the pasuk, whether it's lashon zachar or lashon nekeva, is not a contradiction, because, and here the point of the Gemara's answer is going to be that be'emes derech is both lashon zachar and lashon nekeva. You have certain words. Taisus here brings a list of different words that you find in the Torah that could be lashon zachar and lashon nekeva. So therefore, there's no contradiction here. In that pasuk that we quoted, it's talking about the Eibishter saying that the Torah will give you the way of life. So therefore, v'Torah ikri lashon nekeva. Torah is a lashon nekeva. The chsiv Torah Hashem timima mishivas nafesh. Timima, we see that Torah is whole, complete mishivas nafesh. What it says, lashon nekeva. So therefore, kasav law b'lashon nekeva. So when it talks about the way of Torah, it uses the term law, because Torah is lashon nekeva. Hasam the mulchamekai. But in the other pasuk where we saw that it said a lashon zachar regarding derech, b'derech echad. So because it's talking about a mulchame, so there it says lashon zachar. Why? The darka shalish lasses mulchame. It's the way of a man to go out to fight in war. Vein darka shal isha lasses mulchame. But it's not the way of a woman to go out and fight in war. So therefore, kasav la b'lashon zachar. So therefore it says in lashon zachar. Okay, that's the answer for the psukim. Masnisen ahadadi loy kashyan. There's no contradiction here in the Mishnayos as well. Hacha delegabi isha. Here, when it uses the term derech regarding the three ways that a woman is acquired, isha niknis b'shalosh rachim. So therefore, katani la b'lashon nekeva. So it says shalosh lashon nekeva because the derech here is used regarding the isha. Hasam delegabi ish. Over there, the halacha of the zav, that you have to inspect the emission to see if it was a einus or not, and that's a halacha that only applies to a male. Only when he has an emission will you have to see if it was a einus or not. The darka shall ishli badik, the man has to be inspected, but ve'ein darka shall ishli badik. But by a woman, the halacha is not the same. By a woman, when she has an emission, she becomes tummy, and it doesn't make a difference if it happened with an einus or not. So therefore, since that mission is talking about a man, the ha'isha nami ba'einus metama, by a woman, even if it was an einus, she would be tummy as well. So therefore, tani lashon zachar. So therefore, there it says derech, and derech is lashon zachar. So shiva as well is lashon zachar. Okay, now the Gemara goes weiter to word drachim. Why? The whole explanation here was regarding the word drachim. But now my time, tani shalosh, what did you explain? Why does it use the term shalosh lashon nekeva mishum drachim? Because it uses the term drachim. And over here, derech is lashon nekeva. But frak the Gemara, nisni dvarim. Doesn't have to say the term drachim. It could say the term dvarim. There are three different things that can be used for Isha to become married. Kesef, shtar, and bia. So then it would say, instead of shalosh, it would say shloisha dvarim, and dvarim would be lashon zachar. Then it's nishloisha, and then it could say shloisha. Why does it use the term drachim in the first place? Answers the Gemara, mishum de kabayla misni bia, because one of the three ways that it says the Mishnah is bia, ubia ikri derech. And regarding bia, we see the Torah refers to it as a derech, as a way, the way of the man to marry his wife. The chsiv derech gever ba'alma kain derech isha mina efes. So it uses this term of derech when it comes to the marital relations. So therefore, it uses the term derech here when it speaks about the three ways of a man to be mekadesh his wife, because one of them is bia. That explains why I would use the term derech, because of bia. But kesef and shtar, regarding kesef and shtar, there's no reason for the Mishnah to use this expression of derech. Says the Gemara, no, mishum bia. But it's using the term of derech because of one of them, because of bia. And there the Torah does use the term of derech. Fragt the Gemara, but v'tani tarti atochada, it's using the term of derech just because of bia. That's only one out of the three. The other two, kesef and shtar, there's no reason to use this unusual term of derech. Says the Gemara answers, chade, one answer here is, sorry. The answer is, hanoch nami tzarich bia nino. that the others, kesef and shtar, the kesef and shtar, even though it's not bia, but it's the first stage of marriage, but the first stage of marriage is, the kavana is then to come to the second stage of marriage, which is the nisuin. What's the nisuin? That the husband and wife live together. So even the kesef and shtar is for the purpose of then to come to bia. So therefore bia is not just one out of the three, but the kesef and shtar is also for the purpose of bia. So therefore it uses the term derech. Or another answer is ha mani Rab Shimoni. The Mishnah here, when it uses the term of derech, it's coming to make a different point. It's saying the point that Rab Shimon said. The Tanya Rab Shimon Aimer. Rab Shimon said, "Mipnei ma omra Torah ki yikach ish isha." Why, when the Torah talks about marriage, does it say that the man takes his wife, he marries his wife? V'loi kasav, and it does not say ki si lokach isha leish, that the woman will be taken to the man. Why doesn't it focus on the woman? Well, there's other gerses here in this Gemara, silokach or sikach or sakiach, that she'll be taken to the man. So the reason is al isha. It's the way of the man that he is the one that has to go and look for his wife. And it's not the way of the man to go, the woman that is, to go and find her husband. Why? This is an analogy of a man that lost something. So who goes to look for what? The owner. He goes and looks for his aveda. So over here as well, what happened when the Eibishter created Adam Arishan? Adam Arishan was created with Chava attached to his body. It was one of Achas Mitzal Oisav. And then the Eibishter came and separated from him. So therefore, the Isha is the aveda of the man, and therefore it's the derech of the man to go and marry his wife, to look for his wife, that is, and therefore the Mishnah uses the term drachim, not because of bia, but it wants to be meramas to this idea of that the man is the one that goes to look for his wife. That's the lashon of derech in the Mishnah. Okay, the Gemara goes on over here to discuss this lashon of drachim, the way you find it in other places. We'll see you, Mitzvah Shem.